What is it about the cockamamie Shining? Arguably the most over-discussed and debated film of the modern era, Mr. Kubrick's horror opus is a cinematic object nonpareil and a beacon for rumor, analysis, and kookery, in a similar fashion as the Overlook Hotel itself is seemingly ground zero for all supernatural and paranormal, parapsychic phenomena in the continental U.S. Perhaps it is the fact that the story deals with extrasensory perception that causes so many of its viewers to feel that they have an almost psychic ability to see either deep below its surface meaning or completely through it, to the point of dismissing it entirely. This movie, that by all rights should be viewed as an unequivocal masterpiece by everyone, has, for whatever reason, proved to be so confounding and mesmerizing to a gullible public, to the point that it might actually go down as Stanley Kubrick's most important contribution to cinema. And he made 2001: A Space Odyssey. Today, we will add our voices to the noise, the restless cacophony of ghostly cries that enshroud this work, and attempt to peek through the fog and find our own understanding of the mystery. And as we continue our series of podcastian eulogies to all the new Hollywood greats recently lost to us, we will do our best to clear the air about perhaps The Shining's most famous quote-unquote victim, the late, great Shelley Duvall.
Welcome to Kale Your Idols, a new Hollywood podcast with your hosts,
Sam Ludwig
and Elena Gibson. This is a podcast about film. Primarily, we discuss movies, directors, actors, and writers known for their work during the new Hollywood era of studio filmmaking that began in 1967 with Bonnie and Clyde in The Graduate and pretty much ended in the early 80s with One from the Heart and Heaven's Gate. In this episode, we are celebrating Shelley Duvall as we discuss The Shining. And we have a special guest on this episode. We are welcoming back Michael Dougherty, film person, essayist, advocate, who joined us a few years ago for our Hal Ashby episode. Michael, welcome. Having you back on the show has been a long time coming, and we are super excited to have you discuss The Shining with us.
Oh, I've missed you so much.
It's true. You've been absent, and we felt it.
Yeah. I've been a ghost, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It is. You evoked Kubrick on the Hal Ashby episode.
I will evoke Kubrick in nearly every conversation that I have with everybody.
Would you consider him one of your favorites?
Besides Woody Allen, I think that he is probably the great American writer-director of the second half of the 20th century. Period, full stop.
I'll agree with you, and I'm sure so will every person listening to this podcast.
Yeah, it's coming out swinging.
Yeah, well, Kubrick is the ultra-dense, non-prolific artist, in a sense, and Woody Allen is a little bit more diffuse and more of a numbers game player, I guess you could say.
True. But I would say that both of them changed their particular genres. I mean, Kubrick did it 10 times over, but also Woody Allen, they came to define particular genres in the modern era that even if you denounce both of those filmmakers, you have to at least pay a certain debt to both of them. But especially Kubrick, because Kubrick really is the mountaintop, I think, for most American filmmakers. And his influence looms over everything, even though, as you said, he was not very prolific. But yeah, I love him.
His filmography is absolutely insane. I mean, his first 3 films, not common household names, but then the remaining films, 10 films? They're titles that I think the average American has heard of, even if they're not a film enthusiast. Like, just to list them, because it's worth listing since he's so consistently amazing in the work he puts out. His last 10 films: Paths of Glory, Spartacus, Lolita, Dr. Strangelove, 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, that's an insane run of movies.
And the fact that he was a serious capital A artist who could be challenging to the best of scholars was also a pop filmmaker. I mean, his movies made money. And you're right. People, the average person knew the name and knew all of those movies that you just mentioned.
Yeah, and The Shining was him chasing a hit.
Yeah.
Coming off of Barry Lyndon, which was less commercially successful and also less critically successful, which that's the interesting thing about Kubrick is he's one of these people that, you know, as I alluded to in my intro, people are always trying to think they're smarter than, especially critics and plenty of audience members too. You talked about his place in the pantheon, but he is almost a weird director to call your favorite. You know, it's like saying you love the Beatles or something. Because, I mean, he's beyond a favorite. And it's almost like saying you love Kubrick is, it doesn't describe much about one's personality. Although I would say being a person who strongly dislikes Kubrick does.
Oh, that's interesting.
Say something to me about somebody who I could see a little bit into their psychology sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of think he's one of those directors that if you're a lover of film, you probably at the very least think he's objectively a great filmmaker, even if he's not one of your favorites. That's how I feel about him personally. He's not one of my favorites. Objectively, I recognize his masterful work that he's created. Like, I know he is a fantastic director, or was a fantastic director. Why he's not one of my favorites, I think, is because his films can be distancing and leave me a little cold. I think one of the things Pauline Kael said in her review about The Shining is that he's clearly so focused on cool camera work that you get a little less absorbed in the horror aspects and the emotional aspects of The Shining. And I think I had a similar experience. I love The Shining. I think it's a great movie, but it's harder for me to connect emotionally with Kubrick's films in a way.
But the reason that we're here today is to celebrate Shelley Duvall and the towering nature of that performance. And I'm going to go to bat hard for it, is that you're right. He's a cold and distancing filmmaker, and she is not. She's the most fleshy, approachable human actress that you could ever come across. And that conflict is, I think, one of the reasons that the movie is so endlessly watchable and fascinating.
Yeah, her performance is amazing. Stephen King, whose criticisms we will get deep into in this episode, he called it one of the most misogynistic characters ever put on film. And I just really don't even know where to start with that. Like, I mean, it's, again, I do also think that this, you know, Kubrick is a distancing filmmaker, but I think that the idea that he's not a humanist or isn't interested in actors is often another version of people trying to be smarter than him, because it's the two quotes that he gives that I think describe his approach to directing actors are, one, real is good, interesting is better. Mm-hmm. And also in filmmaking, you don't photograph the reality, you photograph the photograph of the reality. So he is more comfortable with a certain kind of expressionistic performance that is the antithesis of somebody like Robert Altman, who Shelley Duvall had been her entire career almost, you know, had been under the auspices of. He gathers these actors that you would think wouldn't work in a Kubrick movie, and he almost always gets their most iconic performances out of them. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, like the idea that because Shelley Duvall's character in the movie is simpering or
hysterical,
the kind of person who is in an abusive relationship, and that's misogynistic. I don't understand where that criticism comes from. With King, it's a profound sense of himself being misunderstood through his work. He doesn't want to be associated with this thing that he does not getting, but I think it's a blindness to a certain kind of human nature that is present in Kubrick's work, and especially in Shelley Duvall.
Personally, every time I read a criticism about The Shining, I see the point that the person is making, and I agree with it on some level. But I think despite those correct points that people bring up, the movie is still fantastic. Like, I do see the criticism of Wendy, the character played by Shelley Duvall, being way more hysterical in the movie than in the book. Sam and I both just listened to the audiobook of it. Sam's read it before. Have you read The Shining, Michael?
I first read it when I was in the 6th grade, which is not a good idea.
Not a great book for children.
No. It's although I will say that horror was very interesting to me as a child because I was in the hospital so much for various things. And I thought, well, it can't be as bad as what Danny Torrance goes through. So it actually gave me some level of relief. I mean that sincerely. But yes, I have read the book and I have listened to the Campbell Scott doing the audio book. He's really, really good. It's one of these things like Jurassic Park or Jaws where I love the book and I love the movie, and they're very different, but I allow that both can exist in the same world.
I fully agree. I think they complement each other really well. And I totally see Stephen King's criticisms about the ways in which the movie doesn't capture the book. But I think that criticism stops there. It doesn't capture those aspects about the book, but it is its own thing. The movie is its own thing, and it does an amazing job telling a story in a very visual way. And I think it has more horror than the book does.
Yeah, there's a version of this criticism that I think sometimes comes from King, but is often cited by people who are usually sort of viewing themselves as on the side of King, which is that it's less scary to have everybody, I mean, particularly Jack Nicholson, acting crazy the whole time. But I don't really agree. Like, what I think is so great about the movie The Shining is that the non-scary scenes are scary. The stuff that has nothing to do with a ghost or anything is still creepy. Just the scenes of people talking give you a sense of dread, and that is what I want from a horror movie. And it's not really something that's done in any other horror movie that I know of. They usually try and have moments that, you know, everything seems nice and then the horror intercedes.
Just to piggyback on that, where Kubrick can show you a wide shot of a gigantic lobby in broad daylight, and it makes you go, there's something really wrong here. Something's really kind of upsetting, and you can't quite put your finger on it. And I think that's one of the great miracles of it, is that they put so much subliminal stuff in it. Kubrick was like, go deal with it. I'm not telling you what any of this means. And I have theories about certain aspects of that. But there's this idea that the movie just existing is meant to creep you out.
And it does. And there's this idea that, I mean, this is a true idea. In the book, it is the story of a man's struggling with his demons and a descent into madness. King is, of course, one of the great humanists of fiction writing. He's very interested in dealing with emotions and sadness. But I think the book is ultimately more sad than scary. To me, it's not really that scary to be spending so much time dealing with the alcoholism or the worries about what generational trauma you're bringing from your dad's history of abuse. That is interesting, and that is a worthy thing to write about. But I don't actually find it that scary, but maybe some people disagree. They think that the movie lacks a scariness because it starts at a 10 and it doesn't have anywhere to go.
It's more disturbing than it is scary. And I've seen it so many times at this point that there are certain parts that just kind of make me laugh.
It's all making me laugh. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of that's intentional, but I always found the whole thing with Stephen King objecting to what Kubrick did. I think that Kubrick honed in on something that King was trying to talk about, which was the inescapable nature of alcoholism, that Stephen King was worried that this was going to kill him. And by getting rid of Jack Torrance in the book at the end, he was kind of putting that chapter of his life to bed. But I think in a different way, in a more visual way, what Kubrick is actually telling a very similar story that, yes, Jack Nicholson is going crazy from the very beginning, but that's because, yes, this man is trapped in this and is never going to get out. He's telling you that from the very beginning. I mean, the part of the brilliance of the book is how well it foreshadows everything in the first 10 chapters. You know exactly where it's going in the first few chapters. Kubrick saw, in dramatic terms, almost like a Greek tragedy. He's going into this and there's no way out of it.
I totally agree. And to circle back to King's criticisms about Wendy as perhaps a weak, hysterical character compared to the book, in my opinion, yes, in the book, Wendy is more strong in the end, I suppose, in the sense that she isn't screaming and crying as much. Her actions are very similar, though. And the other thing is that I don't think King wrote Wendy as a character with as much personality as he wrote Jack in the book. Jack has a clear personality right from the beginning in the book, and Wendy doesn't. Wendy is constantly described in terms of her identity as a female, as a wife and a mother or a daddy's girl. And she doesn't have a clear identity outside those female identifying roles. And Stephen King makes a point of specifying that she's not as intelligent as Jack in the book. Jack is supposed to be this very intelligent person, and that's actually one of the reasons why he was hired, because the manager, last time they had the caretaker stay over the winter, he tried to hire somebody who didn't go to college because he thought he wouldn't be as vulnerable to cabin fever. And that clearly didn't work because then he murdered his wife and children. And this time he's like, okay, no, I want a smart guy.
I felt very called out by that in the book as a person who only has a high school degree. I was like, what, you think I'm going to kill my family? Jesus.
But Stephen King, he had, in an interview, said that regarding the character Wendy, I always saw in my own mind Wendy Torrance as a kind of middle intelligence, beautiful piece. Shelley Duvall just looks sort of nervous and overbred. So King isn't exactly treating the female character with a lot of respect, in my opinion, in the book in a way.
What does overbred mean?
I think it means she's got weird teeth.
Yeah, I think he means kind of like
Inbred?
Yeah, I think that's what he means.
Yeah.
Is that a dig at Texas? What? Oh, that's weird.
Yeah,
It's fucked up.
and then he's painting himself as this like feminist by criticizing the character. It's so confusing to me.
Yeah, one of his criticisms about the casting of Shelley Duvall is that she's not hot enough for him. He thinks that, Wendy's supposed to be this blonde, sexy wife who has a very sexual relationship with Jack. And yeah, he doesn't think that she's attractive. Now, on the flip side, Kubrick intentionally cast Shelley Duvall because he thought that if she was a really attractive woman, why would she be sticking around with Jack, who has this alcoholism and a history of abuse on their child? So I don't exactly think that Kubrick's reasonings for casting Shelley Duvall based on level of attraction are all that great either.
I mean, I don't know if he specified that it was because she wasn't that attractive. I think
he definitely insinuated that.
Yeah, but he was also talking about that Shelley Duvall has this sort of servile quality to her, that she's sort of agreeable. And I do think that Kubrick is seeing something in King's book that King is blind to himself because he identifies with the character so much. Because Jack, I don't understand it. Jack Torrance is the primary antagonist of The Shining. Full stop. He is the threat in the book. Yes, he struggles and the hotel is controlling him, but it is taking advantage of problems that you see in him from the first scene where he's being a dick in his mind to Ullman. He has already abused his child before he goes to the hotel. There's a reason that he is the bad guy, even a sympathetic bad guy, but it's all there in the book. And Kubrick, I think, is looking at this dynamic and being like, okay, how could I make it make sense that a woman would still be with this guy who's clearly kind of a piece of shit? I think his reading of that dynamic of an abusive relationship is more true to life than King's reading of it, which also in the King miniseries, have you seen the Shining miniseries, Michael?
I haven't seen all of it. I've seen bits and pieces.
It's hard to get through. But yeah, the casting of Rebecca De Mornay is
a bit odd.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the correction you wanted to make? This is who your dream Wendy is? She's not that great at that in the miniseries.
But I will say, one of Kale's criticisms is she feels like the family unit doesn't feel like a real family in the movie. And I do agree with that. It's like we're already entering into the phase of the family where they don't like each other from the very beginning, it seems. She says she feels like Shelley Duvall kind of feels more like a nurse type character than a mother. And the connection between Jack and Wendy isn't there much in the movie from the beginning. And all that's all true. I don't think that's necessarily a problem, that's where Kubrick tries to start the story. I heard he did intentionally try to start the story where he feels like Jack already hates his wife and child from the very beginning. That's just a different choice than Stephen King made.
I mean, I think it's more explicit with Kubrick, certainly. But I see it in the book as well. There is definitely a difference. But again, back to the Greek tragedy thing, I think Kubrick is dealing in archetypes. He's treating it like this is opera more than a traditional narrative, which is a choice and not for everybody. But the sort of blunt force of the whole thing never really bothered me all that much. And then as I got older, and it's the Duvall performance that I think really upsets the whole thing, brings it out of the thing we're talking about, the cold, detached thing. She does not allow that to happen. And so the hysteria, and she's hysterical, it actually serves as a feature rather than a bug. for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, sorry to keep bringing comparisons in and stuff, but we got to talk about this. The miniseries is 4 hours long, and Steven Weber plays Jack in that, who's an actor who I love. If you want to see a great Steven Weber performance, he's great in The Shining, but he's great in the Reefer Madness musical film adaptation. He's amazing. A cool actor, and it is much more of a slow descent, and there's a lot more time where he's at his typewriter getting interrupted by his wife, and he's mildly irritated. And that is not frightening to me. It is relatable on a sort of human level.
I knew you would think that was relatable.
Of course it is. but
I kept thinking, Elena, about you writing your dissertation and turning to Sam and going, "You're breaking my concentration."
Okay, you're right. Touche.
It has gone both ways. It's true. But my point is, in the movie version, Jack is already so pissed off at every irritation, and Shelley Duvall is doing all of the heavy lifting with her, like, well, I'm just coming in and seeing how you're doing, hon. She is the one who's really portraying that she's trying and desperately attempting to not get on his bad side, but she knows it's inevitable. And Jack has to be a movie monster. Seeing him just be slightly irritated at his wife and son does not a horror icon make for me. So Shelley is bringing the human level to this dynamic, I think, which you have to have it in there because the story's a mishmash of a lot of different elements, and you got to balance the different things. That is kind of the genius of King, is he's always able to throw in, okay, so there's ghosts, there's a hotel, maybe the dad's going to murder, and the kid's got psychic powers. Go. Like, how do we get all this stuff to work? Jack is certainly not being called upon to be a human being, as most of the actors in most Kubrick's movies are rarely asked to do. And I think that's why it doesn't stand out so much for me, like his performance being extra weird compared to, say, Ullman's performance.
I think you're both totally right about Shelley Duvall being the linchpin of the emotionality of the movie, because this is a movie that's, for the majority of the runtime, just three people, Jack, Wendy, and their son Danny. And so if Jack's the scary monster, Danny's a child actor, so you can't ask him to do that much, then you do have to rely primarily on Shelley. And yeah, she's hysterical the whole movie, but she's also one of the most iconic scream queens of all time because of that performance. So even when she's being hysterical, it is visually arresting seeing her flap her arms and run around. Like I laugh when she runs with the knife, but I also think about that imagery when I think of a horror film.
She's not equipped to deal with this, which is what makes her impressive. You always expect him to kill her. When you're watching the movie, you never think she's going to make it out alive. The more she flails, the more triumphant it is when she gets out alive.
It's absolutely atrocious that she was nominated for a Golden Razzie for her performance.
Don't get me started on those.
No. We want to get you started.
Even more annoying is the fact that they rescinded it later due to internet rumors about the way that Shelley Duvall was treated. The Razzies are so beholden to what they assume public opinion is.
Yeah, I don't like this whole thing about laughing at quote unquote bad art. It drives me crazy. And so the Razzies as an institution has always bothered me. But more than her getting a nomination or winning for a Razzie, I'm bothered by the fact that she wasn't nominated for an Oscar and that the supposed legit prestige awarding boards left her out because there was the whole myth about how, and by myth I mean story, about how Kubrick was torturing her on the set. What I see is one of the, and I mean this, one of the greatest acts of artistic courage to be able to put yourself through that. And like, she's hysterical. She had to do that stair scene like 127 times. And so to maintain that level of performance, take after take, we should genuflect to what she achieved in that. So The Shining really, I think, belongs to her more than anybody else. And that's my hot take.
Hell yeah. No arguments here. Yeah, she said that she had to cry for 12 hours a day for 9 months straight filming.
Insanity.
Yeah. And she spoke about how the process of having to get yourself to cry for that long, you can tell yourself at the end of the day, I was just acting, that was just for a movie. But that was a feeling in your body. Your body felt like it was in distress for such a long time. There were reports of her feeling very physically ill on set, and I'm sure that had to do with it. It was very emotionally taxing. Although afterwards, she said when she was done filming, she had this calm sense of contentment, and she felt like it was almost like a primal scream therapy session for 9 months straight. It was a 12-month film shoot, but it was like 9 months of the screaming, crying part of the shoot. This whole thing about Kubrick versus Shelley on set, I do think we should dive into it for anybody who's not familiar with that. But there's an interesting question about the ethics of having to force your actor, I'm not calling out Kubrick for this. I'm talking about filmmaking in general. The ethics of an actor having to be in such a dark place for such a long time. And yeah, I'm curious both of your thoughts about it.
I'm more on the film side of things, so I definitely want to hear what Sam has to say, because I haven't acted as much. I've done a little, but I don't know. I'm of two minds. One, don't be an asshole. Realize your actors are there to tell your story. They're trained in order to do this. So keep that in mind. And I think that Kubrick's reputation has preceded him, even in death, has preceded him by a mile. And so when he gets to set and tells you, oh, we're going to do this 127 times, you do it because he's one of the masters. On the other hand, an actor complaining that they have to do another take, a part of me is like, well, that's just more time to act and to figure it out. You may not like the process. And I get the sense that Kubrick was not very good at articulating what he wanted. He would always say that I don't know what I want, but I'll know when I've got it, which I don't know is the best way, especially for a guy who was so meticulous to take the center of things, which is acting, and leaving that more to chance. It's a bit strange to me, but I and this is in support of Shelley, is that I would hope that the actors are just willing to go where they need to go and not complain about it like people do in our modern Gen Z-ish internet age. So yeah, don't be abusive, but go to work.
There's not really much evidence that Kubrick was abusive in any way. There's plenty of evidence that he was exacting. And you could argue that the entire process of taking a year to make a movie is itself a form of going too far. But the thing you got to understand about the Shelley stuff, because I am also of multiple minds about it, is that a lot of the hand-wringing about this process for her is done by other people on her behalf. Whereas she has really never had anything but ultimately warm and nice things to say about the product and what the experience was to her in the end. She will talk about how it was a grueling, really hard shoot, and she'll talk to you about all of the difficulties that she had, but she has never claimed to be... So the basic sort of myth aspects of this is she's never claimed to have been traumatized by it. She has never claimed that it caused any mental illness in her. And she did not leave the industry. These are all things that people say all the time. You can ask Google's AI if this is true, and it will tell you it happened. But she has never claimed any of those things. Now, I mean, it's weird because there is a lot of stuff where now you bring up something like that, or Madonna correcting the record about Sean Penn abusing her. And people online will be like, well, are you going to really trust Madonna now? Like, she's just protecting him. And I'm like, whatever happened to believe all women? Like, it's only believe all women unless they're trying to say they weren't abused. And at the same time, though, there is this thing of directing in this time period where you hear people talk about manipulating actors, and it is usually actresses that got manipulated. You rarely hear stories about, oh, I needed to slap this guy. I needed to slap Al Pacino because he couldn't cry. And Shelley Duvall was not slapped by Kubrick or anything like that. But, you hear stories about people being like, I needed to get this thing out of... it's like Dustin Hoffman talked about slapping Meryl Streep in Kramer versus Kramer, which is just... it makes you want to beat the shit out of him. So there is this level of protectiveness that you feel for actors of the time. That being said, though, comparing Shelley Duvall to Jack Nicholson as far as how trained of an actor they were, I am sure that Jack Nicholson required less work than Shelley Duvall did, especially working in a completely different milieu than she had done in her entire career. I mean, the difference between Altman and Kubrick is as vast as you can imagine.
Well, Jack Nicholson graduated from the Actors Studio.
Right, yeah.
And Shelley Duvall was discovered at a party.
And Robert Altman actively told her not to take acting lessons. Yeah. Because he liked the very naturalistic performances that she gave, and that's the kind of director he was. I do think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that up until this point, she had primarily worked with Robert Altman, who had a very different type of acting style. And Kubrick had said, any time where I had to do a bunch of takes on set, really what it came down to was the actor in that case didn't know their lines well enough to be able to also be giving an emotional performance. So it came down to actor preparedness for him. And I believe that, as has been mentioned, she was less of a trained actress. And she only recently started taking acting very seriously, in the sense that, like, she wanted to learn more about the art form of acting. It wasn't until, I think she said, Thieves Like Us, where she felt like she really actually wanted to work on her skills as an actor. And she has said the experience of working on The Shining, yes, it was grueling. She'd never want to do it again, but it did make her a better actress. And she felt like she was able to then go into the filming of Popeye with a whole new set of acting skills. I think that for anybody interested in the Shelley versus Kubrick conversation, there's a really great video essay by The Back Focus that I think really breaks everything down in a great way. And I think one of the problems with this whole question is that there was this Dr. Phil interview with Shelley Duvall that was really in bad faith and was taking advantage of her in a time of a mental health crisis. I think it did a lot to fuel the fire of this idea that Shelley Duvall was abused on set by Kubrick, even though outside of that interview, which is clearly taking advantage of her, she has said multiple times, and a close personal friend of hers at the end of Shelley's life had said that she looks back fondly on her experience of The Shining.
Yeah, she admitted in the staircase scene that she wasn't doing it well at first. I mean, she said, she was like, I wasn't doing a great job of seeming shocked. There's a certain blandness to Shelley Duvall, which is great in the Altman work. And this idea of this very expressive form of acting, especially to say nothing of the emotionality of it, but even just her eyes are like wide and she's just like reacting to like, oh, it's a ghost, or it's like really scary. Like to do that is itself very difficult. And like Jack Nicholson's performance in this movie would never be in a Robert Altman movie. Like there's no way, like imagine that.
And we are poor for it.
I mean, yeah, Nicholson and Altman, that's a pairing that you want. I mean, I'm sure it would have been great because Nicholson.
No, I want that performance in a Robert Altman movie. Like,
no, yeah. This movie is the end of an era for almost everybody involved in it. This is kind of an end of New Hollywood movie in a weird way.
Yes. Kubrick wasn't technically New Hollywood, obviously, but yeah, this was kind of the end of something, because I think in part the studios realized they could make money, but they could also make prestigious things, and they could get artists to do what they wanted, which was not the case really with Kubrick. But I think the model of that certainly worked, and it opened the door, or blew it off the hinges from the door that was opened with The Exorcist, where you could make horror movies that would be taken seriously, that were not just seen as trash.
I wanted to follow up on, you said Kubrick's not technically New Hollywood. Are you referring to him making many of his movies in England, or the fact that he started making films earlier?
That he wasn't one of the movie brats that came up through film schools and independence in the 60s and 70s, that he was part of the studio system in the 50s. And I think was a figure that everyone in New Hollywood looked up to. So he was making movies during that time. But I think he's a bit of an outlier.
Kubrick is a great person to discuss this question of what is true blue New Hollywood versus not, because we were just talking about this, like, what Kubrick movies are we allowed to cover on this podcast? Because Kubrick's perfect period, 10 out of 10 masterpiece period, really does match exactly the New Hollywood era, 68 to 80. If you think of 2001, Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, and The Shining, those movies are all giant leaps forward for cinema in a bunch of different ways, as far as the nudity and the violence and the technical achievement, the combination of different elements of as far as what makes a movie. Like, I wasn't even thinking about this until I watched this documentary on Kubrick, A Life in Pictures, about just how much he revolutionized the use of musical soundtracks as far as having a commentary on the action. Obviously, you think about the music in 2001, but before that, the idea of taking a piece of music and putting it in a movie and not just scoring the movie, not just having the score match the action or like tell the story along, but really taking the music and mushing it together with the images in almost a music video way. It's very new, and yet it seems so out of time. And because we're talking about classical music and he's such a formalist, he does seem like he's of an earlier era. But I don't know. I mean, he's so fresh and new.
Yeah, I personally, in terms of what counts as new Hollywood director and what doesn't, I think people do typically think of the movie brats as the most quintessential new Hollywood directors. But my personal thoughts on it is there also is this whole set of filmmakers who did have earlier career, for example, like Sidney Lumet. I think of him definitely as having a very strong new Hollywood presence, and yet he started out in TV earlier in his career. He wasn't one of these younger movie brats. So the way I think about New Hollywood is you have these different brands of directors. You've got the new up-and-comers, and then you also have the more established directors who are able to swerve and really fit the time period really well.
Lumet talked about that as his hot period, which, if you just think about it, it's like that was just kind of a hot period for directors to be able to do.
Sidney Lumet is eternally hot.
It's true. But this was a time when if you were a person with talent and with a vision, the combination of the changing of the social mores with more director freedom, and you were just like ready to go, you could really take advantage of it, no matter what age you were at.
I guess for me, when I think about New Hollywood, I think expressly about the collapse of the studio system and how they were all fumbling. And I guess because Kubrick, even while it was supposedly in shambles, always worked in that system, I think from an ethos standpoint, yes, I would agree that he fits along. It's just that I'm just talking in terms of where things fit. He doesn't entirely fit for me, but that's another fascinating thing about him is that he was a Hollywood director who was the weirdest one that the system ever produced.
Well, you're right. He was a Warner Brothers guy.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers maintained that relationship. I think all of these movies are from 2001 on, right? Or is it from Clockwork Orange?
No, even before, but before
Spartacus?
Yeah, I think Spartacus was the first one.
Which Spartacus is just such an interesting version of the early movie that got away from you, that sort of cemented in your mind, I need to have creative control, because this is a movie that won Oscars, was a huge hit, was a critical success, and yet Kubrick was like, nah, that ain't the one. And I need to do that. That did not work for me. I need to do it my way.
But there's still stuff in that movie that, again, from an ethos standpoint, like, oh yeah, that Stanley Kubrick was making that movie. And I was thinking about the whole music thing, because that's such an interesting point that like he was the guy who took music in film from just being an emotional experience to making it an intellectual one. It's like, I'm moved by this, but why is this being played? Like your brain goes off at the same time. And I was remembering that it's not a music cue, but there's the scene in Spartacus where the gladiators are waiting to go into the arena, and they're sitting there, and you can hear the guys outside fighting and dying, and I think there's like a constant drum going on. It's this idea that in this big Hollywood movie, he had this whole thing about like, well, this is fatalism. This is we are destined to die, which is a very Kubrick idea to put forward in this big Kirk Douglas star-studded thing.
He was an eternal ironist.
Yeah.
In a way. Like, I mean, I think all of the movies are very intentionally funny. This is a very Daniel Plainview kind of performance Jack Nicholson's giving in this, where every line that every character says, I'm cracking the fuck up when Ullman is going like, well, he killed his family. And I mean, it's every single line reading. It's got multiple things going on. It's creepy. It's upsetting. It's this kind of weird pleasantry, and yet it's also honed for the humor.
I agree. It's a really fun watch. Some people feel like the pacing is too slow because of the long dialogue scenes, for example, and its length. But I think that the entertaining aspects of the performances really make it interesting to watch, even those long dialogue scenes. Do I wish some of those dialogue scenes with the bartender and the waiter were a little shorter? Yeah, I do.
Controversy.
We are both shocked looking at you to say that. The Grady scene or the Lloyd scene? What are you talking about?
I feel like I didn't need two bartender scenes. Okay, they are straight from the book. All right, so that's in the book. The bathroom scene, the wonderful thing about that is the amazing set, those red walls, which was inspired by a Frank Lloyd Wright hotel design. It's amazing, but I felt like those scenes dragged a little. But you two clearly disagree.
Well, the pacing of it, I don't know. Like, again, reading into it, but it makes me laugh. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
you all know exactly where this is going.
Right.
Rick is dragging you through it the entire time,
Yeah,
laughing at us the whole time.
Mr. Grady, I'm pretty sure you chopped your family up into little bits. Just how he's like, I don't know if I should say this, but to me, the Grady scene actually, I would say, is the high point of the film. That is my favorite part. If I were to put my critical hat on, if I have to, I think I prefer the earlier stuff in the movie to the end. There's great stuff in the chase scene and all of that, but once Jack is chasing them around with the axe, that is when I feel the length more so than in the earlier dialogue scenes. I love the sense of dread, and the slowness of everything is a big part of what makes it creepy. Like, even when Jack is looking at a hot naked lady, that part is still scary. Even before she turns into a crazy witch, the way that she's moving and coming out of the shower is deeply upsetting because of how slow and deliberate and odd it is.
Been there, man.
Yes, right? You're like, move faster.
Yeah, that does feel very much like a Lynch type of weird surrealism in that scene. It's like the shower is so short compared to her. It makes her look like this really tall, otherworldly creature. It's very effective and creepy.
And the bathroom is enormous. No bathroom is that big. But again, it's like he's messing with us from a visual standpoint, because your brain is going, this is not right. Something about this is completely off.
100%. But in terms of the length and if it feels like it drags or not, and Sam, you saying you like the beginning stuff more than the end, the ending, I know in Kale's review, she felt like it went on so long and there were so many repetitive long scenes. For example, the baseball bat scene, that goes on a bit longer than a director would normally have, of him swinging the bat and her going backwards up the stairs. Or Jack chasing Danny in the maze. There's a lot of repetition there that she feels like you're pretty worn down in the end. And I do kind of feel like the ending is anticlimactic. I think the ending shot of, well, there's two ending shots, but I think that, sorry, we're going to spoil the ending. Jack's face frozen is one of the most iconic scenes or shots in all of film. But the movie just kind of ends and then has that weird reincarnation teaser that doesn't necessarily fit super well.
Do you know about the cut ending?
I knew there was an alternative ending. Did they actually film it?
They filmed it. It went to print and then went to theaters. It involved Wendy and Danny in the hospital. But I think part of the reason that it was cut was because Kubrick didn't want to reassure people that everything was going to be okay. He wanted to leave it on more of just like it blankly ends. But the interesting thing about this, and this is so Kubrick, is that he had it in the prints and had PAs or people that he worked for him go to the theater and cut it to the exact frame that he wanted it and had it removed because he didn't want anything being left behind. And it speaks to his OCD type of filmmaking, but also the amount of power that he wielded at the time, that he could just send people, I need you to cut this to my exact specifications.
And destroy it.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a good thing he did. When we were covering Last House on the Left, there were lots of stories about projectionists cutting random scenes out at their whim. So it could have been botched if he left it up to people at the theater. But I actually thought you were referring to an alternative ending that Kubrick considered for the movie, which was that Halloran, he doesn't, we will talk about what happens to Halloran in this version of the movie, but he doesn't get killed, and he actually picks up where Jack left off, and he murders Wendy and Danny. And then you see a scene at the end where Wendy, Danny, and Jack are all in the afterlife, living a very idyllic family life in peace, dead together.
The last part is kind of interesting, but the idea that Halloran would, no. Glad cooler heads prevailed.
Well, they hint at that in the book.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have been Halloran being possessed by the hotel,
Yeah.
obviously. And yeah, right, the book almost goes there with when he goes to the shed at the very end and he considers picking up the mallet.
But it doesn't make any sense, again, to go back to the fact that, I'm sorry, Stephen King, but in your book, Jack Torrance is the one that is the killer and that you're frightened of because he is a bad person in ways that other characters are not.
No, but in the book, there's a scene where Danny starts to go a little mad and starts rambling the way Jack does. And so I think the hotel is, in the book, trying to work on all of them. It's just that Jack was the one who was most susceptible. So Danny and Halloran and Wendy were able to withstand it a bit more, but Jack's alcoholism and how that affected his relationship with his family is the thing that made him more vulnerable.
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting about this story in every form is how it's kind of has three main characters, and arguably four if you want to include Halloran as a protagonist.
Or five if you consider time itself as the main character in the film, which Kale has said to her own chagrin.
Yeah, to her own chagrin.
She's like, I hate to say it, but I feel like the main character is timelessness. And you can tell she's like rolling her eyes at herself by saying such a cheesy little phrase like that.
She's getting possessed and forced to say it in a review. But everybody views himself as a kind of main character. And everybody views himself as the one who's in some way more aware or smarter than the other two. Danny, of course, is this all-powerful psychic who his powers are greater than anything.
Which is not clear in the movie, by the way. So if you haven't read the book, Danny can read minds. And it's also explained or hinted at the end of the book that the hotel was targeting them so much because it wanted to take advantage of how good Danny was at reading minds. Like, he is much better at it than Halloran. He is much better at it than the average person. And this is explored in Stephen King's sequel to this story, Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, this is another thing that's in the book that's just not scary to me, which is Jack's sense of insecurity and how much more the hotel likes his son than him. I mean, it's an interesting concept. And I do also love in the movie and in every version of the story where Jack is just so desperate to impress the ghosts. He wants them to know, like, no, I could kill my family. I'm up to it. They're always needling him with, are you sure you've got the stomach for it? And he's like, no, trust me, I'm gonna kill the heck out of him.
That's some real failed artist energy.
Yes, that is a great point. But so everybody views himself as this main character, right? Because Danny, he's this all-powerful psychic. Jack is thinking of himself as this puppet master whose his family is his to do with what he will. And Wendy views herself as the only sane one in a house of a crazy man and a child. And so you really are able to kind of flip between their perspectives. Each of them have their own duality of thinking that they're better or more in control and then losing control in a way that I think is actually just structurally very interesting and makes for a rich story despite it having so few characters.
Can we talk a bit more about Halloran and what happens to him in the movie versus in the book? Because in the book, he almost gets killed by Jack, but doesn't die, and he escapes with Wendy and Danny. And, you know, in the very end, there's a scene where he's like teaching Danny to fish, you know, he's like replacement father. But that's obviously not what happens in the movie. You see him, you see all these scenes of him making his way to the hotel, and then as soon as he gets there, he gets killed off. I have thoughts about it. I want to hear both of your thoughts first.
It's one of the great shocks in movie history, particularly because Scatman Crothers, he's just so lovable. He's got that wonderful, warm, empathetic face. And Kubrick's like, well, no, take you out. I would like to know from Diane Johnson, because she's still alive, what that conversation was like. Do we take him out? And I mean, because from a movie standpoint, I mean, it was like, it's the one thing in the movie that genuinely makes you jump. And it's so upsetting, especially the way he goes. It's so violent that it really does shut the door on any sense of human connection and humanism. I mean, that moment seals the fate for virtually everyone in a sense. So for those who like the book, it ends the way it does, and that's fine. But I never had an issue.
I also, the more I watch it, I think it's pretty funny. Because he gets, I mean, yeah, I agree, obviously, with everything you're saying. It's horrible. Scatman is the last person in the world you want to die, but you see him go through this Herculean task of getting the flight and getting on the snowplow and driving up the mountain, and he braves the elements, and immediately he gets axed in the chest and he dies. Like,
Although one thing that I didn't appreciate until this morning is he still saved them because they wouldn't have been able to get away without
The snowcat.
Exactly. One of the criticisms of that I've heard is in a horror movie, you want your monster to kill somebody real. And they didn't want to kill off Wendy and Jack, so who's left? Well, the one black character in the movie. And so there is criticism for that. I think it's a bit hard when you have so few characters. I don't think, obviously, Kubrick wasn't explicitly thinking about that. I don't think Diane Johnson and Kubrick together, because they co-wrote it, as you mentioned, I don't think that was like explicitly something they were thinking about. Maybe they should have. Maybe you shouldn't have to all the time when you're working with such few cast members. But, you know, it does look bad in terms of the whole history of how black actors are treated in horror films. I know that Kubrick said in an interview, he basically alluded to the fact that that decision was because the book was really popular at the time that the movie came out, which is one of the reasons why the movie actually didn't do so well in the beginning. It had a reappraisal later, but people were...
You mean critically, it was a hit.
Critically, a lot of people said they didn't love it at the time. But because the book was such a hit and because people were so familiar with it, Kubrick wanted to indicate to the audience, even if you know what happens in the book, that doesn't mean you know what happens in the movie. And so that moment when Halloran gets killed, it's like saying, you don't know what to expect for the rest of this film. You don't know if Danny and Wendy are going to survive. And that was, from my understanding, the main motivation of that choice.
Well, there's also the more benign middle finger that Kubrick gives to Stephen King with the color of the VW bug, because in the book it's red, and in the movie it's yellow. And then when Halloran's going up to the thing, the camera pans over on a car accident for no real reason other than to show you a smashed red bug on the side of the road, which is Kubrick's way of saying, this is my movie, this is not your book.
So you think that's a real thing? Like that was a message to King?
Well, whether I don't care, but it's funny to think so.
It is, and I mean, I think about like that. It's probably like they had a bug that was the car that they were going to use, and I do think they probably, you know, because like they had shown them in a bug, and they probably just repainted it. And Kubrick did maybe think it was funny, like a lot of the subtle conspiracy stuff. And I don't know if you want to lead into the room 2237 of it all now.
I think it's time.
I do think a lot of the stuff that people believe is in there, and it's a joke that Stanley Kubrick is making. What are your thoughts on the moon landing, Michael? Do you real, not real, what?
No, and honestly, these Artemis people, lock them up.
I know.
Lock them up.
They're pretending to use windows.
Yeah, I don't believe they're hugging and they're crying for anything.
Yeah.
Okay, room 237 really bugs me because it seems more designed to make fun of the people that have come up with these theories and sort of put that mockery down on paper, such as it is. But like I said earlier, like Kubrick made this movie, physically had it constructed to mess with people, with halls and stairways that lead to nowhere, with windows that could not possibly be where they are in relationship to the inside and the outside of the building. Like this was all done on purpose. And I think it all has to do with just this subliminal stuff that was coming up in advertising as much in the 70s, and his sort of comment on the way that American media manipulates people as much as anything else. At the same time, like, I like people that see things in movies. That's why I'm here today. I like talking to people who have ideas about things, who look into a movie and say, you know, that's kind of weird that there's that skier poster that sort of looks like a minotaur and the Minotaur is connected to the maze. Like that does kind of add up to me. And somebody may see something completely different. And I know that Stanley Kubrick, wherever he is, and I believe he is in the afterlife, there is a God who has words with him every morning, says, behave yourself, Mr. Kubrick.
And God is playing Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
Right.
He's glorying in the fact that 45 years later, people are still talking about the pattern in the rug in room 237, which really does, it's like this magic eye thing where it really kind of messes with you, to the fact that the rugs in the hallways, the patterns change sizes. He did intentionally do that. Now, why and what the ultimate purpose is, that's him. I don't really care. But the fact that it's like really messing with me and I keep noticing things, and that it doesn't, for me, distract from the main narrative, that it actually adds to it, is part of why this is so magical. It's magic.
So, yeah, for the people who are not familiar with the documentary Room 237, it's a documentary that's describing different, quote unquote, conspiracy theories regarding interpretations of The Shining. And so some of the big ones in there, the moon landing one, which we've already alluded to, where the shape of the rug is in the same, the hexagonal patterns in the same shape as the launch pad for that moon mission. And 237, that number in the book, it was 217, but Kubrick wanted to change it to 237. And he said that the reason is because the hotel associated with the story, they didn't want people to never stay in room 217. They had a room 217 and they were worried nobody would want to stay in that room if it was mentioned in the movie, although the exact opposite ended up happening. People request room 217 all the time. And so he changed it to 237 because that room is not at the hotel, but people interpret it as, textbooks say that the moon is 237,000 miles away from Earth. So 237 is gesturing towards the moon landing. And then the most obvious thing, which is absolutely in the film, it's there, is that Danny is wearing a sweater that says Apollo 11 on it. So yeah, those elements are there. I don't know about if the rug was supposed to look like the launch pad. It does look like it, but without a doubt, the sweater was an intentional gesture towards the moon. But I feel more like he's mocking people for thinking that he faked the moon landing rather than him saying that he did. I believe that we really did go to the moon. That's what I believe. Other theories in there is that the film is a metaphor for the genocide of Native Americans. Again, it does explicitly state in the script that the hotel was built on the burial grounds of Native American tribes. That's in there. Now, I think that people overanalyze, or that one, the person who really spearheaded that theory, I think he's reading too much into it, seeing a lot more than is actually there, and that the whole film isn't about that, but there are some aspects about that. There's a lot of Native American art in the hotel. Another one is that because the number 42 appears randomly throughout the film in different ways, that the movie is about the Holocaust. Yeah, I do think that's the one I believe the least in terms of having any elements
Kubrick
there.
was interested in the Holocaust, though. He made the Aryan paper. He wanted to make the Aryan paper.
Right. But was the whole film about that? I don't think so.
42 equal the Holocaust?
I feel like it might have been more of a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference, which I think came out the year before.
I think I don't know. That would be amazing if it was, but...
But I agree with you, though, about how it's a little annoying that the documentary Room 237 seems to be laughing at them when, to me, I actually, as somebody who took film classes in college, I read a lot of film essays published in academic publications. And the way that, well-regarded film essays can pick apart a movie and say, oh, this means this and this means this, is not that different than the way some of the people were talking about their theories. It's just that they were a little less eloquent about it. And the way, and I, as somebody who wishes I was more eloquent, that shouldn't be the main thing that you judge somebody's thoughts on. So, yeah, I think some people's analyses are taking it too far and overinterpreting. Yes. But as you said, I like people who think about film.
Well, it's interesting to talk about the movie making fun of these people, because I do think that the sensationalism of the conspiracy claims were a big part of what made 237 something of a sensation when it came out in 2012. What I find dismaying, though, is I don't know if the culture has treated these people as kooky enough, frankly. Like, the movie might be trying to make fun of them, but I would say this kind of rampant conspiracy thinking has only ramped up since this movie came, as far as Stanley Kubrick goes. And I find something interesting in the approach that the documentary takes by putting some people who are just, doing film criticism in their analysis next to people who are making rather outlandish claims about the nature of reality, and that it's sort of juxtaposing these things. The movie Room 237 is itself something that you can read a lot of different ways in an interesting fashion. But to me, it almost feels like a relic of a different time when people did read into movies in this way. And I feel like I don't see enough people doing enough analysis into film. It feels like everybody's turned into this version of, all the people in my English class used to scoff at the teacher claiming that there was a color symbolism thing in a passage. And they'd be like, oh, what, you think like the author's like wanting to think about that? And it's like, yes. And yet I do think that there's a lot of people who are taking the film analysis of Room 237 and applying it to real life in ways that frighten me. And I think that there is a lot of people who truly believe like the moon landing theory put forth in Room 237. And I don't know if it's because of that movie, but that's alive and well, the belief that we didn't land on the moon and that Stanley Kubrick maybe had a hand in faking it. So I think the movie's come out very serious in the end.
Room 237, you mean?
Yes.
The thing about the conspiracy theories is that one of the things that makes The Shining so eternal for me is the lack of answers. And the whole thing with conspiracy theories is that it's the bedtime story we tell ourselves because we can't deal with the world being a vast, ambiguous place that probably doesn't care about us as much as we would like it to be. And I don't think that art of any kind should satisfy anybody's comfort about the world. So part of the interest of the conspiracy theories with the movie, which I don't think is as toxic as what you're pointing out, what we're doing now, is that it constantly slips away, that there's no way to determine exactly what this is. I mean, I think the movie is very much about white supremacy and about a male figure.
As is the book.
Yeah.
There's a Rudyard Kipling quote about the colonization of the Philippines. So about the white man's burden.
That's in the book.
Yeah. But this idea that this man is losing his mind because Black people have jobs and women can think for themselves. I don't know if Kubrick was as much interested in that second part as Stephen King was. But I think that was definitely on Stephen King's subconscious.
Yes.
But yeah, the reason I go back to Kubrick and the reason I love him and the reason that he is so much the sort of true north is because of his slipperiness. But he is also constantly talking to his audience and saying, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? I mourn the fact that social media got up on its hooves and we have not knocked it down to such a degree or regulated it in a way that can bring this discourse back to a healthier place. I don't want censorship. I don't want government regulations of any kind. I just wish that we could have a discussion and stop yelling at each other, because social media can be a good thing. I met you two lovely people because one of you decided randomly to follow me. So like it has its value, and I am appreciative of that. But you're right. You know, people take the idea of discourse around art and want to put it towards reality, and that's just not a one-to-one. It doesn't work.
I do think Room 237 has been kind of good for The Shining, though, in the long term. Like, I sort of think that the movie, I do think that began a new phase in the criticism of The Shining. Like, what was the prevailing view of The Shining, the movie, when you were a kid? Did you have any sense of that, or how people talked about it?
I knew that the "Here's Johnny" thing was one of the first memes because it was something that my parents mentioned, and they had not seen the movie, but they knew the reference to it, and they knew that isolated moment was a thing. I read the book first, so I was more coming from the point of view that Stephen King hated the movie more than anybody else, but film criticism came to me when I was probably like where I was taking it seriously and like my brain was able to reflect things was more when I was like eighth or ninth grade. By that point, I had heard about the myth of Stanley Kubrick and this reclusive, crazy person that lived all the way in England and but was American. And I just remember it being like, oh, this is one of the horror movies that you have to see. I didn't couch it in terms of where does this fit in the continuum of movies and where does this fit in his filmography and what does it mean for the history of horror? I just like scary movies and spurting blood.
This movie doesn't give you that much blood. I mean, it gives it sparingly, but like some of the creepiest stuff is like the dog giving a blowjob. And
my favorite part in the entire movie.
I love
Is it actually?
It is, and I would do a podcast just on that.
Well,
We'll say more.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, because the movie is really about Jack going crazy because of his probably being gay and probably having sexually abused the kid and not being
Really?
able to. Yeah.
I've not heard that theory at all, and I that's certainly not something I saw in it.
Here's the conspiracy for you.
Yeah, we didn't get this in room 237.
So it's a gay dude in a dog costume in the book, but it's a bear in the movie, and there's a bear painted above the headboard on the wall above Danny's bed in his bedroom. Now, I don't think that continuity errors and Stanley Kubrick can really be put into the same sentence unless they're on purpose. I think that there's a connection there between, and the fact that he can't really get it going with the woman in the tub, which, come on, man. Like, what are you doing? Naked woman soaking wet, getting it. Come on. Like, you're Jack Nicholson. And the fact that Shelley Duvall is so desexualized, I don't know. I think there's something in there about abusing of the kid. And we know that he's been abusive, but that I think that there is a sexual element to it. But just so I'm clear about this, I just love that in this very mannered, stately movie from the world's greatest director, that he has a random moment where a woman runs up the stairs, turns around and sees a guy in a bear costume blowing another guy. I just was like, great. I'm glad movies, we have them and we're better for it.
When I saw that scene, I was like, that's a Kubrick sensibility type of thing to include because, obviously Eyes Wide Shut, weird secret sex society. But then I was surprised to find it is actually in the book, as you mentioned, it's just a dog instead of a bear. It does that thing that horror films are really guilty of showing homosexuality as deviant and scary, which, is not great when that's the main way that homosexuality is portrayed is through horror films early on in the history of filmmaking and gay representation. But Kubrick definitely does have this weird sexuality.
Fear of parties.
Well, I know one of his early films, I forget which one, it might have been in his first film, that people didn't love it who saw it, but there was this one scene where a woman got tied to a tree and was, there was a sexual element to that. And that part is what stuck with people, is that woman being tied to the tree. So Kubrick definitely, the way that he displays sexuality in his films is interesting and maybe a little more poignant than some of his other scenes in his films.
Well, he'd been wanting to adapt Tram Novelle, which is the book that Eyes Wide Shut is based on, since the 50s. So he clearly had this idea of a sinister ballroom space where you got people in masks percolating. And when he was, seeking out a book to adapt, because he was, of course, perhaps the greatest adapter of books in cinematic history, and most hated by the authors. His goal for making whatever he was going to make after Barry Lyndon was he wanted to make the scariest movie of all time, because that was kind of his MO with every genre. He's like, I want to make the most this genre movie ever. And he read a lot of books. He would always throw them against the wall. And I can't remember who was it. Was it
his assistant?
His assistant, right, heard him not throw a book against the wall when he read The Shining. And there's just a lot of stuff in the Shining book that I could imagine Kubrick being like, yes, this book gets me. Because it's like they reference the Blue Danube at one point in the book. And also the song I Know You Rider, which the Grateful Dead covers. So that's my Grateful Dead tie-in. But there's just like a lot of references to stuff that was clearly on Kubrick's mind already. And a lot, it's got a lot in common with Eyes Wide Shut. I do think that that's a big part of what inspired him in this story. And I also I don't think he really made the movie that different from the book. Like, I think if you read the book, it's all in there.
That's a big thing about the King criticism is that, yes, it takes a different shape or a different face in some ways, but how unbelievably he honors what King was feeling and thinking about. I mean, the gay stuff, that's also there with Jack Torrance and the student that vandalizes the car. What did he know or
it's
didn't
alluded
know
to something, right? Yeah.
And I thought, well, it's has nothing to do with the stutter. It's something else. Whether King was thinking about that consciously, it was coming out in the wash, and the eagle eyes of Stanley Kubrick saw that and said, well, I think we can, what does that mean if it was abuse in one way? Could it be in another way?
Yeah, you're making me think now. You're making me think. Somebody's making me think about The Shining. How much of Jack's internal monologue is about performance of masculinity as a husband and a father. And it's like, no, you need to show them who's boss. This is your wife and this is your kid. And are you a real man? Or I do think that's in there, even in the book. You're totally right.
And he's just because I thought of this, he's this big hulking man, and yet Shelley Duvall can knock him down the stairs with one hit.
Yeah, right. Grady's like, your wife is proving to be more formidable than we thought. He's really needling him there. Going back a couple ways to some other things that Kubrick and King famously disagreed about. Kubrick's great line about how any story that presupposes the existence of ghosts and an afterlife is inherently optimistic, which I also then, think it's funny, your vision of him in heaven. I was thinking about Lee Unkrich, who's the Pixar director of Coco.
I want that book.
Toy Story. I know. If only I had $1,000. He wrote this big tome of a book. He wrote sort of the definitive play-by-play. He did thousands of hours of interviews and, got people to tell you exactly what happened throughout the shooting of The Shining. And
it's really expensive.
I think the prices come down now, but it's $1,000.
Yeah, I think they have like a cheaper Amazon version, but the original thing that came out was $1,000, and it's like a gigantic, beautiful coffee table book. But nothing should cost that much, especially when I'm interested in the topic.
Yeah, but he got unfettered access to the Kubrick archive, and he was talking about how upsetting it is that how controlling Kubrick was over destroying scenes and behind the scene footage that he didn't want people to see. And the interviewer with Lee Unkrich was like, but he's probably happy at the end that you're writing this book. And he's like, oh no, I don't think he would be happy at all. I think he would be pretty pissed off I wrote this book. So. But then also just to bring back the one last thought of the optimism of the afterlife concept, that does tie in with the ending with Jack and Wendy and Danny all being happy as a family in the hotel as ghosts. Kubrick could have made that work given his worldview.
It's weird because obviously the movie's very dark, right? And that's a prominent aspect about New Hollywood films, obviously. But the book is more pessimistic, in my opinion. Like, the book is so pessimistic where the characters, I don't know, like Wendy's relationship with her mother is very dark, where the mother blames her for her divorce. And Jack's father, you think at first, oh, he's a decent father. Nope, just kidding. He's alcoholic with a history of domestic abuse. And there's this scene when Halloran is on the plane getting to Denver to try and save them. He's sitting next to this woman and she's reading a book called You Can Be Your Own Best Friend. But she has this like disbelieving scowl on her face. Like, that's bullshit, And that to me just feels like a Stephen King outlook. Talking about whether or not his book should be read by a child, in a way, they are accessible to a younger reader. Yet they also have this very pessimistic outlook on the world that Kubrick in his movie, as we said, like we're laughing a lot at things that happen in the movie because of the performances, and it's more of a thrill ride, and it's disturbing, of course, but it's also a more fun experience.
I'm all aflutter again because I was thinking about the whole thing about children reading his books, or even seeing The Shining when they're like, what is the appropriate age to see it? I think it's more because of the woman in the bathtub, probably more than anything else. That if people knew about that would make them skittish to show it to a child, other than maybe therapy bills. But I just remember I read so many of those books when I was an angry, sad, lonely little kid, and they always made me feel better. And one of the reasons I've been drawn to horror for as long as I have is because ultimately I think the main thesis of horror is that it's about vanquishing death. Kubrick doesn't let you out of that necessarily, but yes, I agree. I think the both of them are world-class pessimists. But, and I've said this because Samuel Beckett, I may even mention this on the last episode, I don't remember, but Samuel Beckett's my favorite writer. And Waiting for Godot is my favorite piece of writing ever. And people are always like, well, it's so sad and depressing and it's about hopelessness and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, he's writing about the void. But one, he's writing a story about two guys who have each other to survive it. And two, as a general thing for me, like my artistic sort of ethos, whether it's what I'm doing or what I like, is that any expression of horror or disbelief or hopelessness is itself an act of hope, because it allows people like us to deal with it and to sort it out. And I feel less afraid because I know that I have people to talk about this stuff with, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and so you were a King fan as a kid.
Yes.
I was too. I read a lot of his stuff, and I don't.
Not recently though.
Yeah, I don't read a lot of it.
I haven't read a lot of his newer stuff.
But this was your first King that you'd read or listened to.
I actually don't think that's true. I do feel like I read a King novel when I was younger. I think it was one of his lesser ones, and it didn't make a big impact on me. And I remember thinking, that's not that scary. I don't remember which one it was. But reading or listening to the audiobook this time, I really enjoyed The Shining. I think anybody who's a fan of the movie, definitely check out the book. It's a lot of fun. I think we've said this before, but or at least I said this before, I don't think it's as scary as the movie. I don't think King's stuff is actually that scary. Whereas the movie, I know plenty of people don't think it's as scary. Plenty of people think it's more disturbing. But I was looking behind my shoulder the entire time we were watching, and I needed a palate cleanser at the end. We had to put on Anastasia so that I could fall asleep. And
it was a terrible movie.
Yeah, it wasn't a good movie. But also one of the things that helped palate cleanse is Sam showed me the recut of the Shining trailer, where it's recut as a romantic comedy. Yeah. And that helped me, to be honest. And it made me think, when I was doing my research, the actor who played Danny, whose name is also Danny, similar to how that, Jack is named Jack, obviously very young when they shot the movie. He wasn't allowed to watch the full movie until a few years later, but they showed him like a 10-minute kiddie cut of the film right after it came out. And I'm like, I wonder what that one was like, because they told him while he was filming that he was just in a drama. Yeah. They didn't want him to know that it was a horror film. And I'm just very curious what that kiddie cut version of the movie is.
which is an odd bit of that counters the myth about Kubrick, is that like he cared enough about this little boy's burgeoning psyche that he didn't want to expose him to anything that might be even remotely traumatizing.
I have a lot of thoughts about filming The Shining, but not knowing you're in The Shining. So like, there's clearly moments where the dad is, where it's like, okay, your dad's coming to kill you. So it's like, okay, this is just the drama version of this. This isn't scary. And
no, but like, they didn't have to film Jack
right, yeah,
doing his side of the scene when they filmed Danny's side of the scene. So not necessarily. They could have just been like, oh, go hide right now. Make a scary face right now. You're running through the maze right now.
But I also like to think about him, doing the scenes where he's talking to his little finger and making a Tony voice, and him just thinking like, this movie's stupid.
No,
like,
that was his
who
idea.
Would watch this?
That was his idea,
yeah.
His
idea.
But I just think he'd be like, who would watch this movie? Like, I mean, I know he's a kid and not a film critic, but not understanding the great larger context, I do wonder what he thought of, like, how can I just making this movie? I hope it's good.
Okay, I have a complaint about the movie, but it's also a complaint about the book because it came from the book. The red rum thing.
Mm-hmm.
The building the red rum and then the reveal that it's murder backwards. It's like, we know there's murder in this story. Why is that a reveal? Like, what does that add at all to the story? I didn't understand how that reveal gave any extra understanding at all to Danny in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because it works in the novel as when you're looking at the page and they have the explanation that it's like red rum because the book is so much more about alcoholism. I guess that puts you off the trail. But I was actually told about red rum before I saw the movie. Like, my stepmom and dad were explaining the movie to me, and she was like, yeah, and there's like the part where it's red rum, and then you see it in the mirror, and you find out it's murder. And in hindsight, I'm like, did that really leave that big of an impression on you? But I mean, it's an indelible moment of cinema, but it seems like it would work much better in a movie than in a book.
Well, I think also that it's a child and he doesn't understand what this means. It's just something that he heard or that his little finger told him.
Well, there's so much more in the book about him learning how to read because Tony is constantly showing him signs that he can't read. And so he wants to understand the world. And this is interesting, but also I'm just like, they put a lot of that in the miniseries of him like learning how to read. And I'm like, guys, this isn't scary. Like, him learning how to read.
But I forget, is it Wendy that's in the mirror moment or
yes.
or is it's not, and Danny's not there?
No, she's hugging him, but he doesn't see it.
Because if he's learning to read, maybe that's just the moment where he put that together and even he wouldn't know what the word meant.
But this is another reason why I think Kubrick was very interested in, I would say, adapting rather unadaptable novels, from Lolita on. And The Shining as a book is really hard, and they had to cut out a lot of things. Obviously, the technology wasn't there for like the topiary animals, which thank God they cut that out because it's not scary at all in the miniseries.
If I have one thing, I wish they had found a way to keep the Hornets in somehow.
That part is good. But the character of Danny is an impossible character to realize in film, you would think, from the book, because he's supposed to be 5 years old, but extremely intelligent. And in the miniseries, again, they just cast a 10-year-old and he looks way too old and he doesn't seem like he should be under the same amount of threat as Danny in the Shining movie is. That's a little fucking kid. And I understand why they would have to keep so much from him because I don't even know how you would have a real conversation with a kid that age about what the movie's actually about because you want to preserve this extreme level of innocence. I really think that is one of the parts of the book that would be such a challenge, would be to realize that character and the stuff that they did with the coming from him, apparently, with the finger talking and stuff. These are such great ways to get around these problems of visualization.
Yeah, the visualization of the horror is really fantastic. There's criticism about how, his horror shots, they're just static shots and they're not incorporated into the story in a lot of ways, like the twins and the elevator scenes, for example. The characters aren't really interacting with those horror elements a lot, and that's something that people have criticized. But it's still the elevator doors opening and blood coming out. That was Kubrick's decision. In the book, the elevator opens and there's party favors from this scary party that's going on. It's like confetti and a mask. And that's not that scary. Blood coming out is really scary. My sister requested that we talk about how that how that scene was shot. It's practical effects. Like, they dumped buckets of fake blood into the elevator and then they just opened it up and shot it. And Kubrick apparently was so stressed about whether or not it was going to be pulled off correctly that he couldn't watch it being filmed. He had to leave the set and said let me know if something goes wrong. But it worked so well that the cast who was filming it, or the crew who was filming it, was worried they were going to get drowned in the fake blood for a second.
Yeah, and I love how they didn't do that many takes with the fake blood. He's like, we got it. Let's leave early today. They did 2 or 3.
So what do you think about the body that's in the blood?
The body in the blood.
This is another one of the visual things that's there but has never been explained. That when when it's splashing up, it's starting to flood, you can see a body of somebody kind of floating by.
I've never seen the body.
Same.
There's definitely something there. I should also say it that moment with the elevator made for one of the greatest movie trailers of all time.
Yeah.
It's the way that trailers should be done. Parts of the garbage we're dealing with now, where they tell you everything.
Mm-hmm. No, that is true. That's trailer moment perfection. I mean, and just visual moment perfection. Like who would think of that? And also, of course, it did set up one of the greatest jokes of all time, which is the Simpsons joke.
Yeah.
The blood usually gets off of the third floor.
Yeah.
What?
Well, we never watched The Shining, but we should have. But there's a part where the blood comes out, and they're like, "That's odd. The blood usually gets out at the third floor." Anyways, she's not a Simpsons fan.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. No, so the moment is when the blood comes out and splashes up against the camera so that everything's red. There's what looks like a person in the blood kind of floating there. It only lasts for like a few frames.
I kind of want to look at it now.
Yeah, wait. Hey, can we like look it up real fast?
Yeah.
Red fleshy object. Oh yeah.
There's something there.
It? No, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, well, we'll have to rewatch the movie and pay attention.
There's definitely something there.
This is like that part in Room 237 when the guy's like, "There's actually an image of Stanley Kubrick in the clouds," and then they show the picture of what he's talking about, and it's not there.
But do you know he is in the movie?
No, tell me.
Okay. So when Jack goes for the interview, and the camera is pushing into Ullman's office, Kubrick, and you can only see it for like a second before the camera turns. He's hiding in the bushes outside the window.
Like
he's definitely there.
This was an intentional thing.
It may be a Hitchcock thing, or it may. I don't believe that continuity errors really existed with like accidents like that would have existed with Kubrick, but he's definitely there.
So I do think that even though he is known as such a meticulous director, he's known as this really intelligent director, I think he's still a human. And I personally think it's still possible that continuity errors exist in the movie. So I kind of disagree with that idea that any continuity error is actually not an error. Like I think he's still entirely capable of making mistakes.
These are year-long shoots too.
Yeah. So that's just my personal opinion. But
fine.
But of course, it's interesting comparing him to like Wes Anderson, who's also known as this very meticulous visual director. Yet people don't read into Wes Anderson films the same way that they do with Kubrick. Is it because Kubrick is considered this intellectual genius who loves to play chess and is this recluse? Is that why people read into his stuff so much more?
Well, I think Wes Anderson is much chattier and had a career when there was the internet and didn't mind talking about his movies. And although is there a lot of explanation as to personal psychological reason why Wes Anderson is doing what he's doing? Because it's been picked over with Kubrick, but I don't get the sense that he's treated in the same way. He's definitely a fellow technical master in exacting and OCD in that way.
They're similar, and they're almost mirror images of each other, too, because they're both these ironists where they put dark themes, typically, into a package that is often almost winking a little bit at the idea that it's talking about. I would say that the themes of a Wes Anderson movie are typically a little bit more explicitly stated.
Yeah.
And also he has gone further and further into a single style, as opposed to Kubrick, who is always kind of trying deliberately to get ahead of where film was and find a new place within himself. And yeah, I think the recluse reputation certainly added to that. The sudden death at the end of his movie that was about Jeffrey Epstein or whatever,
Is it?
No. I mean, I know.
Did he know?
Did he know?
They're definitely leading the daughter away.
Yeah, I know. I know, man.
Like it's there.
It's there. I know. I don't know. I mean, I think that Kubrick is just fundamentally a very dark filmmaker, and that is probably what I think is what results in people thinking his movies are deeper than somebody like Wes Anderson, because Wes Anderson has this sort of brightness overlaid on stuff, even though his themes are often
All
quite
his
dark.
movies are
His
really
movies are very dark. No, I know, yeah.
But
Some more so than others.
I want to go back to Atlanta because I want to be taken to task on this, because if I'm too much in the Kubrick hive mind, drag me out, because I do sort of favor the idea that he was so obsessive that he wouldn't allow, and like there are intentional errors in this movie in particular, but speak more, because I'm interested.
Well, my personal philosophy is that I don't idolize other people as much as the average person does. And so
It's a
I
problem with me.
really?
Me too.
I mean, in acknowledging that he was probably a very difficult person to be around, and if anybody complained about his tyranny, like they're probably right. I don't know. It's just that it's because I'm so connected to the art that I can leave the person behind.
But I mean, even in terms of somebody's intelligence, I like, I'm around smart people all day at my work. I work in a lab, and I think my coworkers and the people who give seminars who've won Nobel Prizes, obviously they're incredibly smart people. But I also see everybody as a person. There's lots of different forms of intelligence. And so I think the thing with Kubrick is a lot of the idolizing of him comes from the idea that he's just this incredibly intelligent person who would never leave anything to chance or make a mistake. And I just think he's fallible. I think he's a human, as every single person is, in my opinion.
Does that potentially make not him but his work more profound? Because it's getting the feels out of me, the idea that, no, you're right, a fallible human being made that movie.
One of the most fun things about Kubrick's filmography is how shitty his first movies are, though. I just gotta say, like, seriously, like, that is one of the best parts, is how he did not start off as a super genius.
Yeah.
For me, it's more the profundity of art in general.
Yeah.
That something amazing and masterful can be made by fallible humans, and it can exist independent of the artist after it's created.
But I like the link that you're kind of sort of making, or maybe I'm just making the conspiracy out of it, is this idea that, like, yeah, we're all feeling around. Stanley Kubrick is not above any of us. He's one of us.
Totally. He's a human.
Yeah. And his need for perfection is a thing that a lot of us chase. And we all ultimately fail. I mean, you can say that, like, he failed at the task ultimately because he didn't technically finish Eyes Wide Shut. And so this guy who was in control of everything ultimately didn't get it. And I also heard from when I got to hear Christopher Nolan speak before a version of 2001, before I slipped into a coma from listening to him, he mentioned that Eyes Wide Shut wasn't finished with the sound either, because there were transitions from scene to scene where the sound is a bit abrupt, and you would technically want to smooth that out in the sound design in order. And so he said that Kubrick would not have allowed something like that. So it's just interesting that his most humane and his warmest movie, and I actually do say that kind of unironically, is the one that has perceivable flaws in it.
I mean, even with The Shining, I read an interview with him where somebody asked him about using dissolves in a film, and he said he hates using dissolves. He doesn't like doing it. Why did he do it? Because he couldn't think of a better way to cut between those scenes if it's still taking place in the same location and indicate that time has passed. That's him not being able to come up with a better way to do it as a filmmaker. And he could have theoretically come up with a better technique and didn't. And then he settled with a dissolve, which was not his favorite technique to do. So this movie is not without its flaws. I think the scenes of Halloran traveling up, they're like, they do take you out of it. And there's not a lot going on in those scenes, I've got things to criticize about the movie while I still think it's great. And some of these are faults of him not being perfect.
Keep it going. This is making me so happy.
I mean, he had unrealized projects that he couldn't figure out. You know, Napoleon and the Aryan Papers. Many people rightly criticized the second half of Full Metal Jacket compared to the first half. Maybe you disagree.
Other than 2001, I think it has, and Dr. Strangelove, which I always take out of the conversation when I'm talking about Kubrick, because I do think that those movies are perfect. Because they're not just the direct, it's like the writing, everything about them. It's so interesting and endlessly, but it's been picked over. So I take that out. But I would say that Full Metal Jacket has my favorite ending out of all of his movies. And fun personal fact, Full Metal Jacket was my first whiff of Stanley Kubrick as an 8-year-old. Because I'm old. Full Metal Jacket was out, and I was not aware of it, was not aware of Stanley Kubrick as a person or a filmmaker, none of it, but I loved movies, and I remember the TV spot for that, and there's this shot of the female sniper firing towards the camera, and I remember thinking that it was one of the scariest things, and this was on like primetime television that they were showing this thing. That was my first real memory of Stanley Kubrick, was that.
Full Metal Jacket may have been the first Stanley Kubrick movie I'd seen, and it really messed me up.
Yeah. I mean, the first half of that movie is just like,
yeah,
it's so horrifying.
Yeah.
You saw it before 2001?
I think so, yeah.
So Full Metal Jacket was the same for both of you, the first one?
To my knowledge, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but...
No, it wasn't the first one. 2001, I think, was the first one that I had seen, because I was probably on like a science fiction kick. And that was probably the most widely available of his movies at the time. I couldn't see Clockwork Orange when I was younger, just because it just wasn't available. Because movies didn't stream and I have the full set now, so I can watch his movies whenever I want. But, you had to work for your movies in the 1900s.
Yes. But 2001 was my dad's favorite movie. And he sat me down in a real... We're about to watch something incredibly important, and I'm going to explain to you who Stanley Kubrick is. And he kind of over-explained the movie in a way that then I carried on and did when I showed it to my friends. And I kind of explained all the same stuff to my friends that my dad had explained. And my friend's dad was like, "Can you stop doing that?" He is weirdly accessible. That's a big part of what makes his mystique so intriguing, because he's this Mount Rushmore director guy who stands outside of so many trends, and yet you kind of can't escape him if you're into any genre. Like if you're a sci-fi person, or if you're a horror person, or if you're a costume drama person, I guess. Or if you're a comedy person, Dr. Strangelove is typically listed as like one of the top 5 best comedies on lists often. But yeah, I mean, his movies have always been, I would argue, overly criticized. Like a lot of people, they really think they're better than him, for whatever reason. And these movies are profoundly unsatisfying to a big part of the population in a way that I find that only confounds me more and only draws me in more, perhaps.
I think the criticisms of him are fair. And I think that the love for him is fair, but I'm reverberating from the whole thing about being human. I think that's because I don't think he liked to show it that much in his work.
The streaming era has weirdly been humanizing for him, because I think these movies work better and better on a rewatch, as far as seeing past the initial criticisms that a lot of people have, I think.
To bring it back to Shelley Duvall, I think she is one of the big that did humanize him and humanize his work in a most profound way.
And I don't want to undersell him at all, so I hope I don't come off that way. The movie is so visually astounding. The location, the fact that each room is so strikingly different. The colors are fantastic. I think the set is one of the best parts about the film. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. It's just so insanely striking. It's crazy to me that King, after watching it, was like, "Oh, he should have filmed at the hotel it actually was inspired by." I'm like, that's insane. Like, just this is a work of art, just visually in terms of the set. Obviously, he's doing a lot of really cool camera work. His is one of the early films that used the Steadicam. This famous shot of Danny riding the big wheel across the carpet, and then the wood and the sound. It's all just so amazing. Danny, by the way, was promised by a crew member that he'd get that big wheel afterwards, and he spent like the next several years waiting for that big wheel and never arrived, which I think is a cute little
that's a very Kubrick thing to do. Like, no, kid, you ain't getting it.
I'm burning it.
But he's without a doubt a amazing director. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm not a Kubrick fan.
I just think the coldness thing is kind of overstated. Like, I mean,
No, but like I feel it even before I heard that was a criticism other people had.
a lot of people have it. I'm just saying, like, if you look at Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall in this, I'm not seeing like cold, austere, lack of humanity performances.
No, but I get
Wildness
I get it though. I get what you're saying, Elena. There is a cooling effect to what he does for whatever reason, but I think that critics have often dismissed the levels of humanity that are actually in his work, and that he actually did care about people. And I absolutely, Eyes Wide Shut bears that out in the end. I mean, I think the great Kubrick versus the critical community sort of cosmic joke is like, I just made the warmest movie in my entire career and I'm dead.
And the searching nature of the million takes, right? Like the not knowing what he wants, that belies a certain amount of he's going for perfectionism, but he's not necessarily starting from the place of a Hitchcockian, I know exactly what I want. He's finding through doing. And when people talk about his process, it sounds very fun and human in a way.
All right, I want to shift gears and revisit the question of music because my sister Emma was listening to our Ordinary People episode where I complained that when directors use classical music in their movies, I think that they often are just being uninspired and don't know what else to put in their film in terms of music. And she called me out because she pointed out The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Kubrick obviously uses classical music in a really effective way. So can we play a clip right now of the music from The Shining?
Oh, it's multimedia this episode? Oh, I'm so excited.
I want to play another clip just to call out Wendy Carlos for reusing the same theme in her Clockwork Orange opening shot.
Oh yeah.
The bass line.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you, Sam. It's clearly reusing that same soundbite.
But Wendy Carlos, I mean, a goat, one of the most important electronic music composers of her era and any era. She's still alive.
But she disappeared.
Yeah, she just did like 2 or 3 of like the most important movies ever made.
She helped in the development of the Moog synthesizer. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
You are, yep.
The first commercial synthesizer.
We have her to thank for Baba O'Reilly.
And that synthesizer was used in the scoring of this film. She's really famous within the trans community. She's one of the first people who was public about her identity as a trans woman, which is amazing. I want to listen to her album Switched on Bach. It apparently was super popular at the time. It's an album of music. It's like Bach music performed on the Moog synthesizer. And won her 3 Grammys and the second ever classical album to go platinum. Synthesized music was having a moment, obviously. Yeah, she composed the score along with Rachel Elkin to the entire film. Then Kubrick only ended up using a few parts of her score, and she considered suing him, actually, because something similar also happened on Clockwork Orange. She was like really pissed that they put in all this work and then only a little bit of it was used. She wasn't able to sue him because it turns out she never actually signed a contract. It was just a handshake agreement. But she was really pissed about how much of her music was used or how little of her music was used in The Shining. But the music's great. Speaking of the music, the opening of The Shining is a really amazing opening. It's helicopter shots. It was shot in Glacier National Park. And I read that he had sent a second unit camera crew to shoot the footage and try to find out where is a good place to shoot. So they were shooting at different locations. And the camera crew was like, Glacier wasn't that good. And then he later saw the footage and he's like, what the hell? And he fired them because they didn't realize what amazing footage that they had. But I think it's a really creepy opening because you've got the music, you've got the winding car, and then you've got the helicopter making its own path. So the windingness of the car combined with the helicopter moving around in a different way. And then you have the credits rolling straight up. It's just so disorienting.
Yeah.
The greatest helicopter shot in history. Yet again, it just makes me want to throw every drone into the river. I'm just sick of these drone shots. Like, why can't anybody make a drone look like one of these helicopter shots?
But see, that's the thing. I don't blame the drone. I blame the people that are just using it for utilitarian purposes and not artistic ones.
Well, but I actually don't know. Is there a technical reason for that? Like, can drones shoot on the side and turn like that?
Yeah.
Or they can?
They're much more maneuverable.
Well, then yeah, people are being crazy.
And they're smaller, and they can get them. Actually, because I am somewhat of an apologist, tipping into a fan, but Michael Bay made the movie Ambulance. Have you seen?
I haven't seen it.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so if Michael Bay's not your jam, that's totally fine. But he made this movie. It's the best one he's made since The Rock, and a lot of the movie is done with drones. And there's a guy who knows how to do things technically, and it's like jaw-dropping how cool it is because they're just not used properly. The studios, I think, nowadays want to use digital technology because it's cheap. And all right, fine. But I'm just kind of bummed out that more and more it's just like point and shoot. I know it's a different technology and you're not as happy because it's not film. But then, yeah, figure out how to make the art out of the thing. We're not doing that as well.
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah, so many drone shots are just filler establishing shots nowadays. I totally agree that it's how the artist uses the technology, you know.
And if Stanley Kubrick had made it into old age to where digital technology was the thing that he'd probably still be shooting on film. But I think that if he got his hands on the digital, he would have figured stuff out about that would have just blown it open.
Yeah, I mean, I love Miami Vice, you know. So
I was going to say that is one of the most beautiful examples of digital photography. Spot on.
Well, yeah, I mean, and if it's cheaper and more portable, you should be able to do more stuff with it.
all right, where do you guys want to go next? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground really efficiently, actually.
Well, I want to talk about a couple of things. Really, I want to rank a couple of things. Okay.
Ooh, ranking. I love a list.
Yeah, let's do some ranking.
Love a list.
Okay? Do you think this is Shelley Duvall's best performance?
Yes.
I would say yes. Right?
Not her best movie.
No.
Oh, interesting. Let me pull up her filmography.
An interesting thing that I wanted to note is the first two leads of Stephen King film adaptations are both from the movie Three Women by Robert Altman. Shelley Duvall.
Both from Texas.
And both from Texas, yes. Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek. So clearly these horror people were looking at Altman movies. And I mean, that movie is kind of frightening, actually. So, I get it.
All right, so I'm looking at her filmography. I have not seen quite a lot of her films, so I can't make the most informed ranking. I feel like Popeye is one that I have not seen that might be among some people's ranking. Maybe I'm totally off base there, but I guess looking at the list, it comes down to Three Women or The Shining. And it's kind of a tie for me.
She won Best Actress at Cannes for Three Women.
Yeah.
She was nominated for a Golden Raspberry for The Shining.
Okay, but we disavow that. She's doing more in Three Women. She's got more range. She's given more to do.
And it's a more her-esque performance, in a way.
Does that make it less impressive?
I still go back, and I will always do this, that if it was a 9-month period for which she was doing all the running around, to have sustained that and to make it coherent, I mean, in terms of like the narrative and the way the story's told, I just think that is such a towering achievement to have pulled that off.
Yeah, although there is the argument that it didn't need to be 9 months if she,
Yeah.
you know.
She hadn't gone out with Ringo Starr on vacation so much.
Yeah, apparently the crew was really annoyed with her about that.
Yeah.
Okay, for me personally, I put Three Women first, and then I put The Shining, but I think she's amazing in The Shining. But you two both put The Shining first?
I think The Shining is her best performance. I think Three Women and McCabe and Mrs. Miller are probably the best movies that she's been in. And Three Women, yeah, that would be the other one. That's McCabe and Mrs. Miller and Three Women. Those are my two favorite Altman movies. So she means a lot to me in those as well. But I'm just so in awe of thing. And I have to admit, like I'm in part, and I'm doing this sincerely, but I am in part responding to the bullying. That touches the deepest nerve that I have in me. I'm responding to his bullying her. I'm responding to the Dr. Phil bullying. I'm responding to the way that the society in general had treated her, especially towards the end of her life. We need better help for people with mental illnesses. It's a genuine tragedy what they did to her. That's partly what informs it. But I tell you, Shelley and Duvall and I go back all the way to my childhood because of Popeye. And I was that octopus at the end is so frightening. And I was so scared of it that I was really worried about her and whether she would be okay. But then there was this thing, they had fairy tale theater and bedtime. Did you? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So that was the thing that was always on in my house as a kid. So I didn't even know that she was a serious actress of any weight and who was actually like an immovable part of film history. Until much, much later, because she was just sort of this like guiding hand for my happiness in my childhood.
One of the things I love about doing this podcast is just gaining a greater appreciation for movies and film people through the podcast, because what I used to think about Shelley Duvall was that her face looked weird and it disturbed me. And I didn't like to look at her face. And that's a really rude thing to think about somebody, obviously. It was my honest reaction. But doing this podcast has allowed me to really see what an amazing person she was and to appreciate her as an actress. I have such a fondness for her now. As a big lover of Christmas-related things, I want to put a quick clip in of her Christmas album.
Sugar, plum, spice, and everything nice. I could not quite make up my mind when I look in my stocking on Christmas Day. What in the world will I find? Dear Santa Claus, you're so far away. If you're busy, then well, it's okay.
She's so unique and such a part of the New Hollywood story, so much so that she makes an appearance in Sam's song that Sam sings at the end of every podcast episode. That is my family's favorite part of the song. They're always like Shelley Duvall whenever they talk about the podcast. But yeah, I'm really happy that this podcast has allowed me to appreciate her more.
I think this movie is also very iconic, and it will be the first thing that anybody ever associates with Shelley Duvall, probably. And Wendy Torrance is a horror icon, a cinema icon, an acting icon. And so that, I think, also takes it a little bit beyond the level of Three Women, which is a great movie and perhaps her most enduring lead performance, but not a movie that will be as watched or as present in people's lives as this movie. And this movie is just so important. Okay, do we think this is Jack Nicholson's best performance?
No.
I think maybe.
No, because he does go 0 to 100, and then he's the same one note the whole time. And he does that amazingly in this movie. But again, for me, best performance, I like to see range.
I think one note is wrong. The direction is basically be as crazy as possible. And I think that he actually finds a surprising number of different notes to play. You know, especially when he's interacting with the ghosts and stuff. But I guess, obviously, yes, this is a silly thing to put forward. Although I don't know, though, too. It's again, the iconography thing, too. When your name is Jack and the character's Jack, that's always going to add a little extra personal attachment to it.
And him improvising, here's Johnny. I mean, so I've watched this movie twice now. And each time, the first time he acts as the door and he doesn't say here's Johnny, I'm like, wait a minute, I thought that's where he said here's Johnny.
And it was a play it again, Sam.
But then there's two doors that get axed, and I'm like, oh, okay, there it is. But yeah, he's equally as iconic as Shelley in this movie.
Did you do a Jack episode?
We did
We did specifically Jack's 1975 films.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. Well, that's a pretty totemic year. So I think this is his, along with A Few Good Men. I think that this and Batman. I think those three are like the holy trinity in terms of like his iconic, like this guy is a movie star and you will never ever forget him. I think of those three first, but I would also like to say, I honestly, and I believe this, and I know I give into this type of stuff, but I think that Jack Nicholson is the greatest film actor, at least in America, that we've ever produced. There are people that may come close, but there's just nothing that that guy couldn't do. There were some that would argue that he's being himself or he's doing some sort of caricature through things, but I thought no, he's riffing on different things the entire time. There's nuance to everything, even when he's going completely over the top. So I love the performance in The Shining. I really do. I think it is one of his great performances. But I mean, for me, it's more like something like The Last Detail or Chinatown. I mean, I think those scripts serve him better and his talents better than The Shining does necessarily. Again, The Shining's more like just like blunt force by design.
Well, this is the beginning of Nicholson as a villain, really. He hadn't really played a lot of villains before this. And then it unlocked that thing, which you could argue he's riffing on this performance in The Joker.
He's one of the few actors I think that could go so far over the top that it could be construed as bad acting in anybody else's hands, but he still manages to make it interesting. He still manages to make it watchable. I honestly, I've studied this man for years trying to figure out how he does what he does. I can't figure it out.
He's got the perfect Kubrick forehead.
Yeah.
But he also, I mean, I know I was criticizing like putting people too high up based on intelligence or whatever, but he clearly exudes intelligence in a way that really serves his roles well. And that's one of the reasons he was cast in this, is because of Jack as a person of intelligence in the book. Kubrick specifically was looking for that and thought Nicholson would be great for that. He's got such a strong personality. I agree with you about him being one of the best actors of all time.
Yeah.
So
there's a story that, and I'm going to name drop this because it actually did happen, that Alexander Payne told me.
He told you personally.
He told me personally. I mean, he's probably told it to, but I talked to him about this, so I can actually say that this happened. Mm-hmm. I talked to him. I've met him a few times. He's a very nice man. But I asked him about Schmidt, and he said, I said, what was the experience working with Jack Nicholson? And did you have to rein him in, things like that? And he said, no. He said, I was afraid of him to begin with because of all of the baggage that he brings. And there was a scene that they were working on. I think it was when he first gets to Kathy Bates' house. He wanted to give him a specific bit of direction, and he wasn't doing it because he was kind of intimidated. And Jack Nicholson finally caught on to it and said, well, what's the story here? And he's like, okay, I just want you to do this, and then I want you to walk over here, and then I want you to do this. And he said, why didn't you just tell me that? And he said, well, I was, I just didn't know how to approach you about it. And this is why I love him. Jack Nicholson said, there's nothing that you can direct me with or tell me with that I can't justify for myself. So his being like the method actors that won't move until they have the voice down and the spirit moves them, and they'll complain to the writers or the directors. I just love that this huge, gigantic movie star could probably do anything he wants. Just tell me what you want, and then I will go and do it. I think that kind of humility doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, because he doesn't seem like the kind of person who would have humility. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And he talked about in the behind the scenes Shining documentary that he likes to give himself over to a director because then he gets it out of just being tied to what you expect Jack Nicholson to do.
Yeah.
Do we think this is the best Stanley Kubrick movie?
Oh,
or
God,
most important, or whatever you want to say? Sorry.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Why don't you just can you rank, because he has a short enough filmography, we could do this. Do you want to rank your Kubrick movies?
I would say Barry Lyndon, 2001, and Doctor Strangelove. That's the holy trinity right there. Those movies, they are perfect to me, and I'm glad that a human being made those. And the rest are just, interchangeable.
For me, The Shining is my favorite Kubrick that I've seen. Well, I haven't seen his first 3 movies, Fear and Desire, Killer's Kiss, and The Killing. I haven't seen Paths of Glory, I haven't seen Spartacus, and I haven't seen Lolita. So I have not seen his first 6 movies, but I've seen the rest of them. And for me, The Shining is my favorite. 2001: Space Odyssey is next. And I think those are the only 2 of his that I can say that I definitely like. I appreciate all the other ones, but I dislike them either because they are too disturbing for me to enjoy, or they're like, Barry Lyndon, more a technical achievement than an emotional connection one. I talked about this previously on this episode and other episodes. But my issues with emotionally connecting with Kubrick. So his other ones are those other ones are all kind of tied as not my favorites, but it's not that I think they're bad movies, and I totally think they're worth talking about. So The Shining is my favorite, though, of his.
The Shining, I think, weirdly has a lot of warmth to it and comforting aspects. The Scatman and Danny relationship is so satisfying when you watch it. The moment that you get of him reading his thoughts for the first time, it's creepy, but it's also just like a warm bath. You're like, oh yes, understanding. 2 people who are really capable of connecting to one another.
And then Kubrick was like, and now here's an iceberg.
Yes, exactly. And Jack Nicholson, to me, I find him so hilarious in this movie. Whenever you hear me typing, whenever you don't hear me typing, whatever I'm doing, I can do him for the rest of my life. 2001 and Eyes Wide Shut are always going to be inextricably tied with my relationship with my dad. I guess that's a weird thing to say about Eyes Wide Shut, but I definitely vividly remember me and my dad watching Eyes Wide Shut together for the first time late at night. And we're both just like, holy fucking shit, this is so crazy. And the 2001 was my dad's favorite movie. And another movie that I definitely don't find boring or impenetrable the way that a lot of people do. I find that movie a bit of a breeze. Barry Lyndon, I deeply love, but can be a little intimidating sometimes to put on, to want to sit down for. Although every time you do, you're enthralled. So I kind of am tempted to have this contrarian take that I do think The Shining might be the signature Kubrick movie for me, especially because I think I'm protective of it, because people had this whole like, oh, it's not actually good attitude towards it, and yet it has spawned so much and proved to be so powerful in the long run.
I don't think that's that contrarian of a take.
No, I know it's not. But to say 2001 isn't the signature Stanley Kubrick achievement there are a few movies that have done more for cinema than 2001. So I think it's the whole thing with Kubrick where he's just this given. People often go like, yeah, Stanley Kubrick, he's great, blah, blah, blah. And they use that as a way to not have to engage with the work. And that annoys me and makes me love him more on a deeply emotional level.
Do you think that's his fault?
No. Well, maybe. Oh, maybe. Is that what you're getting at? Or
well, that the self-mythologizing ultimately got in the way of people gaining full access into the meaning and the feeling of his work.
I think it's hard when you're a director, because being a director, especially in the studio system, is always a game about accruing power. You need to be respected, and you need to be cultivating people who want to please you and who want to figure out what it is that you want. The fact that he was able to solidify his relationship with Warner Brothers, where they're like, we'll go wherever you want to go. We want to be in the Stanley Kubrick business. And also be somebody who any actor in the world, no matter how famous, would be desperate to spend a year in isolation, being underpaid and working on a movie like that in order to get to this towering level of being able to really pursue greatness in this way. You probably have to have a distancing thing, although it's also probably his personality. Like, he does just seem like he was a shy guy. He was not a person who you'd want to have on the Dick Cavett show, laughing with Muhammad Ali. Although, how amazing would that be?
Let's round it back to Shelley Duvall. There's a poster that I've been wanting to get it's like a Polish Shining poster where it's a painting of her, and it's one her screaming against the door, that famous image of her. And whenever someone mentions The Shining, that's the first thing I go to, more than Jack Nicholson, more than the bear costume. That's my favorite part. But Shelley Duvall is where I go to first. And if this has served anything, I hope that we've reclaimed her. Because when I was reading obituaries about her and reflections, they always bring up about how they tortured her. And I was like, it's not that she was tortured, it's that she survived it, that she did it, that she got through it, and came away with not only one of the great iconic horror performances, I think it's one of the best performances of the 80s. And so I'm just really, really happy that I got to live at the same time that she did what she did. I was only a few months old when this movie came out, but still.
Still counts.
And she was also one of the kind of the signature New Hollywood aspects of the movie.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we always got to cover the New Hollywood aspects. And I think the people involved is one of the biggest New Hollywood aspects about the film. And I guess the darkness, too. But yeah, she's such a iconic New Hollywood figure.
You want to rate it?
Oh, yeah. Cold Stone rating?
Yeah. So we rate movies like they're ice cream on this show.
Is this wait? Did we rate? Did we do ice cream?
Oh,
on
we didn't
those?
do this. No.
No, we this is a thing we added at some point throughout the podcast, and then we went back retroactively to give our Cold Stone ratings. So you didn't get a chance to give your Cold Stone ratings on the Hal Ashby movies. If you would like to, you can do so.
Just to clarify, what we say is, is it a like it, love it, or gotta have? Have you been to the establishment known as Cold Stone Creamery?
Yes, I'm a person who has been alive.
Okay.
Although I have to ask, because I haven't been, does Cold Stone Creamery still do its thing post-COVID? Because I wouldn't think you'd put food down on a counter like that.
You can't kill Cold Stone Creamery, man.
They do still do it.
So yeah, so we say if we like the movie, we say we either like it, love it, or gotta have it, or we say this movie does not make the scale. It does not rise to the level of a like it. So
Okay.
first, retroactively, would you like to give your Hal Ashby episode ratings? And to remind us, what were the ones we did? We did Thomas Crown Affair, which you
like it.
like it. Okay.
Coming Home, gotta have it. And A Million Ways to Die. What was the
Doesn't make your scale.
doesn't make my scale, except for Andy Garcia. Andy Garcia in that movie, gotta have it.
Yes, I think we agreed on those ratings.
Yeah, that's
I'm not
probably
sure.
exactly what we said.
Just to clarify, in the All the President's Men episode, I believe is the one after we introduced the rating where we retroactively went back and rated all of our previous episodes. But now, as far as The Shining goes, is this a like it, love it, or gotta have it, Michael?
Gotta have it.
Gotta have it.
Yes, it's an unambiguous gotta have it from me, as it should be from any thinking person. I think anybody who wants to give this movie a like it or something is just being an asshole.
You don't love movies.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for coming back on the show, Michael. It was super fun. Such a pleasure having you, and we will definitely have you back on again.
Like soon, not 2 years, not 2 years. I'm making this demand publicly so that the other listeners can make a campaign. If they liked it, have me back. And Jaws. I want to do Jaws. That's what I want.
All right. Michael's claiming his territory.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to plug? Any accounts you want people to follow? Any current projects?
Feel free to find me on Facebook, Michael J. Dougherty, and that's Dougherty, and just mention that you know these guys, and that's fine by me. On Instagram, I do a lot of artwork. I'm part of the thing I've been wrestling with in terms of 2025. If you want to get into this, is that I think 2025 was the worst movie year of my entire life. And that's another podcast. However, I think I fell so out of love that I needed to find something else. And I've drawn since I was a little kid. And I found a groove. So a lot more of my artwork than my movie stuff is up currently, but I'm happy to talk about that as well.
I love your art, man. I don't react enough on social media as
You
much as I
guys don't
should.
react to me at all.
I know, I'm
like,
sorry.
Where are my Kale parents?
I just scroll past it, but your work is beautiful.
I don't really actually use social media anymore outside of just promoting the podcast. But
So cold. So cold.
Sorry, I'm not like seeing it, but you are super talented. Everybody should go check it out.
Yeah.
Did you no no, genuinely love your art. Did you give your Instagram handle, or did we cut you off?
Oh, it's because I'm forever the film nerd. It's Mike en scène as opposed to mise en scène, which is the term for the elements of a shot.
That is why I followed you, is because from your Instagram name, I could tell that you are you're a person who loves film.
Yeah, doesn't leave the house much. Yeah.
No, it's a great handle. Yeah, so thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, and I love you guys, and I love what you do, and you're doing humanitarian work as far as I'm concerned. And because I didn't get to say that, I said it on the social media that you so keenly ignore. Just formally, congratulations, Doctor, on the dissertation and all that.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What are you doing, Sam?
I don't know. I deliver a lot of food.
Well,
Uber
congrats.
Eats.
Congrats. 5 stars.
Thank you. Any rating helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
That concludes another exciting New Hollywood adventure. Thank you all so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Kale Your Idols on the podcatcher of your choice. Please take the time to leave a rating or review. It is extremely helpful for small podcasts like ours. We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out to us on Instagram or send us an email to kaleyouridols@gmail.com. We want to say thank you to the Illuminator for our logo, and of course thank you to Michael for joining us on this episode. Please join us next episode where we will continue to celebrate movies made by New Hollywood figures who recently passed away. Next up, we will be killing 2 birds with 1 stone, in a way, by chatting about Shelley Duvall once again, while simultaneously celebrating the life of Bud Cort by discussing Robert Altman's darkly comic fantasy, Brewster McCloud.
Hey, Peter Fonda. How did we do?
We blew it.